just a quick background on Digital Kids. We established this group a year ago, so it's almost our anniversary. I think our first event was on the 15th, so we're just a little ahead. We snuck 5 events in this year. And we merged 2 different groups, the Smart Toys group that JP had been running with his pal, and the Digital Apps for Kids group that Creativity had been running. And we figured that, you know, kids don't see a difference in the way that they play. They play with digital things and physical things. And so looking at groups at different playthings as separate things is really on us as marketers or designers or engineers or everyone who's coming from their different backgrounds. And so being able to unite those groups and to offer topics that really are looking at these subjects from the consumer's point of view and just how you actually use an object is a more realistic way to be able to cover this broad landscape. And we've gone into really fun topics from voice assistants and how that's emerging as both a channel and an interface, over to how you do kid testing, which is super unique compared to other UX testing. And the most recent one was with Monica Brown about launching DTC brands. Our first one was about bringing a physical product to market, and whether you do that through licensing or through bringing it to market yourself. We have a lot of entrepreneurs on this channel too. So this is a community for everybody who's interested in making great playthings for kids and families. And, you know, once things went digital, we stopped meeting in person and started hosting everything online. And we've been able to welcome just that many more people, which is super exciting. As JP mentioned in the beginning, when people joined, we are always looking for topics. We kind of hack these together every month or so, every other month. And we want to feature our community members and the topics that you're really passionate about. So please do collaborate with us and tell us what's interesting to you. If you have something that you think is really interesting to share, please let us know. We've had a couple really great just single presentations from experts in our field. Research, data, anything that will really help us all be stronger as an industry and to just bring better experiences to kids and their families. So the format today is going to be a panel. JP is about to introduce all of the great members who are going to be joining us from the EdTech field. And I just wanted to thank everybody for supporting us on this way and for being a part of this group. So over to you, JP. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everybody. Really excited for tonight's topic and the group of panelists that we have lined up. I'm going to just jump right in without further ado and allow actually each panelist to introduce themselves. So we'll go Keith and then Megan and then G. Keith, please, just a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Keith. I'm co-founder and CEO of Mystery.org. I got into the space when I had 2 kids of my own. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old now. And Mystery.org is focused on solving the problem of all the questions that kids have. Kids ask so many questions. They usually ask them to grown-ups, to their parents and teachers. And most questions that kids ask, grown-ups don't know how to answer. And so we're collecting every question kids have and creating video explanations for all of them. So we started by focusing in schools. So we have a very popular product called Mystery Science that's in schools and are now going direct to kids at home as well. Great. Megan?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Megan. I am the lead user researcher at Outschool. Outschool is a marketplace for live online classes. So we connect teachers and kids across the globe via mostly live classes in pretty much any topic area you can imagine. So as you can imagine, our trajectory has changed pretty dramatically as a result of COVID and school closures, as is probably true for all the panelists here. But before Outschool, I worked at another startup called DIY, which is a community-focused platform for kids. And so when I came to Outschool, I sort of brought that kid community expertise with me. And at Outschool, I am the lead researcher and also sort of the de facto kid community expert. So I work on a lot of kid-focused product features as well.
Hey guys, my name is G, and I'm a senior product manager at a tech startup called Kiddom. We're based in San Francisco, and we provide personalized learning for kids in K to 12. And we do amazing stuff like helping teachers assign personalized assessments, assignments, and tests, and all that stuff with content integrated. We partner with some of the great curriculum partners out there. And recently, because of the COVID, we've also released our new distance learning features. So we both have asynchronous and synchronous communication stuff all within the product. It was really busy time for the last couple of months. But before Kiddom, I also led internal startup at another EdTech company called Clever. And so designing like subscription-based type of games for kids. And before that, I was a lead product manager at a place called Great Schools. So they provide school recommendations for like pretty much half the families in this country. And before that, I was like doing non-educational stuff, like music and media stuff. But I'm glad I'm in the education space because it's something that I'm really passionate about.
Perfect. That was great. Well, great. So I'll jump into some questions. And like Caitlin said, if you have questions just during the presentations or during the Q&A, just type the questions into the comments, and Caitlin's going to help facilitate some questions from the audience here at the end of my initial questions. So we'll start with G. So G, you've worked with companies through the first .com bubble, and more recently you've helped launch products with EdTech companies, including Clever and now Kiddom, as you mentioned. So do you have any fun memories of one of the companies you worked with who launched a product? And what advice do you have for anyone launching a new product in the EdTech space? And is your advice different for startups than it would be for more established companies?
Yeah, so I mean, start with like some fun memories. There's a bunch of them. So at Clever, we were working on, well, first of all, when we went there, we were working on a bunch of ideas, like great product ideas for families. And one of the things we focused on was creating educational games for families, subscription-based product. And it was a broad idea, right? And we started doing a lot of pilots with local families. And it was interesting where, where like when you first start a product, you're trying to validate your product market fit, right? Your hypothesis. And sure, it was for parents, with adults, a little easier if they're willing to pay or wanting to pay for something at the end of the pilot. That was a really good signal. With kids, it was a little tougher, right? Especially in kids in K to 3. You just can't ask them questions like that. But something interesting happened. So end of the pilot, we basically told the kids that, we need to take our equipments and games away because it's the end of the pilot. So we had a bunch of kids started crying and just going berserk, right? So it was like, oh, this is one, okay, maybe just one kid, but happened to second kid, third kid, fourth kid. At that point, we realized it's like, wow, this is a really good signal. This is a signal that we're really close to like maybe validating our product market fit. So it was interesting, yeah. So that was like one of the funnest memory that I had like working on the project. Another fun part of the pilot was that I love when you get like what I call accidental or surprise innovations that you didn't really think about. And this happens a lot to me when I work on like brand new projects. So for example, when we were working on this like kids pilot, we provided, like Megan might know this, we provided like a journaling, right? So the kids and parents could actually write journals together. But the way we created it was like, oh, let's make it fun anyway. So they would actually write some stuff on it. So into the pilot, when we were like interviewing parents basically told us like, wow, we just love that journaling. Like we had so much fun with the kids. I learned about their interests, not just about what they did with their game, but just I got to know my kids a lot better than before. We never really communicated. And this happened over and over. And we kind of looked at, wow, can we actually productize this? And it actually ended up making it into a product roadmap. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of great happy accidents that happen, So I think when you're like working on an early education or EdTech product, yeah, be prepared to be surprised, right? And a lot of things will happen that was unexpected. You're not gonna have a lot of data, right? So that's something, and I love like using more like qualitative feedback than more like analytics in the beginning to get more insights into like your target audience. So that's one of the big things I also learned. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and there's lots of like stuff like happens like when you create like products for kids, and it's very interesting. Another recommendation that I have is I'll let other panelists also chime in is that um, so I worked at when I was at Clever, one of the things really valuable lesson that I learned was that if you have a team that's too big, it actually could be counterproductive. It could actually slow you down. So what we learned was I actually have a slim team that's very generalist who could wear multiple hats or multiple roles. When we did that, it actually really made a change on how fast we could move with product development and piloting and just validating a lot of the cycles. So for example, like sometimes our lead engineer would be doing customer support one day, or I'll be like doing some designs, or our designer might be doing a little bit of coding. So everybody like chimed in, but everybody was also super concentrated on running our pilot because it was really important for focus. So that's my big recommendation for working on a small team is like keep it lean in the beginning and have a lot of generalists and more entrepreneurial type of like roles. And as you scale, then you could have more people could specialize in their roles. And that's those are the things that actually really worked out for me with my team.
That's great. And is that possible to do in a large company, keeping a group small?
It's really hard, I'm not gonna lie. So my recommendation, if you can, but now we have no choice, but back in the day when you have to go to a place called the office, that I do recommend that having a separate place, right? Getting your team outside. So that I think the big reason is because there's a lot of like red tapes, and a lot of other like politics and a bunch of other stuff that gets like thrown in when you work for like a bigger companies, and that's how it works, right? But when you want to work for a small like internet startup where you can move fast, that's one of the things I recommend is like physical play that's a little different. Another thing is, I'm getting really tactical here, is like also provides you with like using your own technical stack, right? Tech stack. So you don't have to rely on very slow, busy red tapes of like really bigger companies. So you have to ask out of permissions, right? So when you work in your own tech stack, your own way of like doing things, you could actually move faster, make mistakes, and innovate. So I say even for bigger companies, try to get out of the mothership. Yeah.
That's great. No, I love that. So be prepared to be surprised, be nimble, like work in small groups if possible. And some great memories there from the many different sort of companies that you've seen. So thank you for that. I'll move to my next question here. I'll do one question for each guest, and then I'll kind of open it up for each panelist or for all panelists. So I'll move on to Megan. So Megan, you're currently the user research lead with Outschool, a marketplace for live online classes for kids. And as you mentioned, I can imagine that service has just exploded with COVID. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you communicate with users? Has this changed pre and post COVID? And then what should somebody do to ensure they're building features that users actually want?
Yeah, so I do a lot of talking to kids, teachers, and parents. That's sort of the bulk of what I do. And then, bringing those voices back into the different, product and dev processes, company planning at Outschool. I was actually Outschool's second full-time remote employee before COVID. So Outschool is based in San Francisco. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. So I was actually already doing quite a bit of remote interviews and kind of focus groups even before COVID. But I was also going into homes of Portland families to talk to kids in person and to do some co-design sessions with kids. That got interrupted due to COVID, which was a real bummer. I found that interviewing parents and teachers seems totally fine. Going remote, kids are a different story. Kids, I much prefer to be in person. I much prefer to use kind of tactile materials and get on their level in a way that remote interviewing is really hard to do. But make do, still do it, and have gotten a little bit creative with my tactics these days. So yeah, one of the things that I do just to bring in kind of the insights that I'm gleaning and from interviews is I host a weekly share out with the whole team focused specifically on kid voices. So we call them learners at Outschool. And one of the things that's really helped me develop, help me source great insights from kids is developing easy, streamlined ways of getting feedback. And I think one of my, you asked about what are, how do you go about building a feature that you know people will like? Well, obviously, listen to your users. Wait for a global pandemic. That also seems to be a smart strategy. And one of the easiest ways or the best ways to start listening to your users is really to build like quick feedback loops so that you're not stymied by the whole recruitment problem. So both of the EdTech companies that I've worked in have been very community based. And a lot of my kind of strategy early on is to build community around the user groups that are really important to your company and product, so that you have those groups to turn to when you want feedback. Just within the past couple months at Outschool, we brought in a kid community manager who's kicked off some live events and sort of feedback sessions for kids. So he's hosting them on a weekly basis and anyone from the team can join. And they're just sort of fun, but they're also ways for kids to get involved in, you know, co-designing different views on the Outschool website. And they're really fun for everyone on the team. So yeah, in terms of back to your question about building features that people want, I think a couple things come to mind just from my experience. One is, you know, I've worked on B2C products and directed at kids and families. And one of the things that I think is essential is finding the right balance of parent involvement and kid autonomy. And kind of for each product or feature that you're investigating, really diving in with both kids and parents to understand the level that they want to be involved in that particular experience. I think I've experienced examples where we've gone too far in one direction or the other, and it always comes back to finding the sweet spot between those two.
Got it.
And then,
and what age group does Outschool offer classes for?
Yeah, it's any kid from 3 to 18, and we're actually in conversations now to kind of debating whether we should go down to 1-year-old to 18 years old. So
okay,
wide variety of ages.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be another point that I was just going to mention. It might be obvious to those here, but keeping in mind the very different developmental stages that kids go through. So it's easy to lump all kids into one group and say, you know, kids are one user group, parents are another. But a 3-year-old and a 15-year-old are so wildly different. You know, finding a way to make the entire team remember that, I think is crucial.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one question, as you're providing your feedback to the teams on your user interviews, how do you avoid from bringing your own bias into the communication?
Yeah, I mean, I can't completely, and I think, I mean, there's an answer to that for, you know, how I avoid bias in the interview process itself. And then how do I avoid bias in what I choose to share? Because I think that's particularly impactful as well, no matter what you say about, you know, caveats, or this is only one person we're going to listen to, it's usually pretty impactful. In terms of bias in the interview process, I mean, I think that's something I've learned over time, and I'm still learning how to frame questions in a way that you're not going to lead participants to a particular answer. setting the stage at the beginning of interviews, so that parents and kids and everyone you're talking to feels really comfortable giving you both positive and negative feedback. So finding little ways to build trust and honesty into the interview process. And it's hard for me to describe exactly how I do that. I think it's kind of a learned skill over time.
Sure, sure. Well, I bet it's an exciting time there. So look forward to some more questions your way. Let me move on to Keith. So Keith, you created Mystery.org, an incredible platform with interactive videos and activities designed for the classroom. And I understand that you recently launched a home version of the product. Can you tell us a little bit about what led to this new launch? Was it purely led by COVID? And, as a founder, with so many different shiny objects to chase, I mean, Megan, you're managing kids from 3 to 18. I can only imagine there. But for you, Keith, can you tell us how you approach launching new products? Everything from like team structure to like marketing resources?
Unmute. There we go. Overall, it's a really interesting time to be working on products for kids. Like when we started Mystery in 2015, 2015, one of the biggest challenges is if you want to reach kids digitally, the young children are hard to reach. Like tablet penetration was pretty low in 2015. These days, about 60% of households or so have households with kids have access to a tablet at home. So, we're it's relatively recently that we've crossed the 50% mark there. Obviously, smartphones a little more, but parents don't like to give up their smartphones. And so I did a bunch of testing back in 2015 with direct-to-consumer tools that could enable kids to explore all the questions that they had. And it was a challenging distribution problem. And so we ended up sort of following kids to the classroom. Like, kids are our primary customer. They spend half their waking hours with parents at home and half their waking hours with teachers at school. So as an organization, we're agnostic to, which gatekeeper are we trying to work through. We just want to get to the kids and figure out how to support the kids in all the questions that they have. And so early days, schools made sense, and schools were the ones that we found it much easier to get distribution. In 2015, classrooms had just crossed 60% of classrooms finally had an internet connection and a computer. Nowadays, it's about 90% of classrooms in the US have an internet connection and a computer. So we've just sort of followed the kids this whole time. And I think one of the most interesting things that's happening just in general, but with COVID in particular, is parents shifting attitudes towards screens. So, as we're still in the very early days of kids having devices, like I like to joke with my team that we're kind of in the AOL days of the internet. Like anyone who remembers AOL or CompuServe, it's like that's not what the internet feels like today. Like the internet feels so different than these kind of early slices of it. And to my 5-year-old and 8-year-old, they basically have the AOL today is YouTube. Like that is the sort of like, oh, it's got everything you could ever want, right? That's like what AOL used to feel like. And I think in part we're at this junction where kids have devices and there's really a vacuum of content. Like in some sense, like you search the App Store and there's quote lots of stuff there. But as a parent who's trying to find resources for my kids, like I struggle to find good stuff. And so a lot of, I think, grown-ups, parents' attitudes towards these screens is like, oh, I don't know if screens are good. I don't know how much time I want my kids spending on screens. It's in part because of the quality of the content that's there. And one of the interesting things about COVID is it's been this big push for parents to get a lot more comfortable with kids using screens, to spend a lot more time exploring the resources that are out there. And so we're already seeing this real meaningful shift in like, oh, maybe screens aren't so bad for my children. Maybe real learning can happen on these screens. Maybe I shouldn't feel so guilty about it. And that creates a really exciting opportunity to start investing in what tools could look like for kids there.
That's great. That's great. And so when you launch a new product, I mean, is it a subgroup? Is it a sub team that's launching like the home product? And how do you sort of figure out how to market a new product when even pre-COVID, you're sort of selling to both, you're speaking to both schools and now to homes. So how do you both build it and then market?
Building it, we made a mistake, or one challenge we had early on. So there's 50, I don't know, 55 of us. And as soon as we started working on the direct to consumer product, lots of people were excited to work on it, kind of to G's point. And we have lots of experts on the team, design experts and operations experts, et cetera. And so we very quickly, or early in the process, had too many people involved, and it really made it challenging. Like the 0 to 1 process of going from like vague, fuzzy idea to real working product is so much more of a delicate process. And it's a very different both skill set, and it's a different, it's the same point. It's a different muscle. It's a different skill set and muscle. And so much of the skill set and muscle of engineering and design and marketing and growth is around optimizations. Like as an organization, you have a product, you have product market fit, and you're climbing the hill. So how could we increase conversion? Where when you're searching for which hill to climb, it's just a very different muscle. And so there's a lot of people, I experience engineers that are like, wait, we're not going to A/B test this feature. And it's like, we've got 0 users. You can't A/B test something with 0 users. So definitely if in a way, I think it's more challenging to assemble a sort of 0 to 1 pre-product market fit team inside an organization than when you're in the early days. Like when there's only 2 of you, great, everyone can work on it, and there's only 2 of you working on it. Like that's an easy problem to solve. So we had that challenge, and have had to really play lots of defense and sort of get people uninvolved who, yes, you can contribute a little bit here, but no, you're not joining the project, and because now we've got 12 people in every meeting, etc. So it's a unique challenge, I think, for a second product company.
That's great. No, I appreciate that, and sort of piggybacks a little bit off what G was saying. So that was kind of a question for each of you. And now I'm going to open it up for just general questions that that one or all 3 of you can answer. It's going to piggyback off that last point. Maybe G, you've got something to add to it. But like, what do you think is the ideal way to test a new product? You've got an idea for something. What do you think is the ideal way to test a new product or idea?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to tell you what we did. So, for example, both at Clever and when I was at grade school, I started with like friends and families first, right? Because those are the people I really knew, and we knew lots of parents, we knew lots of kids in different grades. Start with that, right? No need to do a lot of like, don't need to hire recruiters to do all the recruiting yet. Yeah, I think there's a big reason why I start starting with friends and families first to test your prototype, your ideas, because first of all, they're accessible, right? And when you're testing with kids, come on, think about it. If some stranger came to you, can we go to your house? Can we watch what your kids are doing? Not going to get a lot of like great responses, right? So actually doing that with friends and families first, we opened a lot of doors. So for example, at Clever, we remember working with like 8 families from all over Bay Area, from all far as like Grass Valley all the way to like San Francisco and all over. And they all have different demographics, right? And actually going to visit their house, watching kids actually doing it, right? Even with this crude prototype, really opens lots of doors. Another recommendation I have is like to test like early product is, I like to use what you call Wizard of Oz prototyping, because coding is really expensive, and and also it takes a while. So what we did was we had some stuff that's interactive, but in the back end, for example, we were making like recommendation systems, or you might something like this. We actually had a human being, that was me, human recommendation system, and my designer writing this human curation of all the stuff people are like, and basically we're trying to test is something that the kids really like and parents really like, right? So doing a lot of the human concierge type of like stuff, we did a lot of that. So that's why we call Wizard of Oz prototyping, right? And we did a lot of this until we got to the point where we're like, okay, this is worth investing. Then we went to the next level and started putting more development power on it. So doing a lot of experimentations, yeah.
That's great. I love that. And let me follow that, and maybe a follow up for you or Keith or Megan. At what is the point at which you stop that testing or stop hearing the same thing over and over from users, and you just go and build it? How do you make that decision? Do you ever have clarity on that decision?
You never do. I think to treat it as a bright line is, instead you've got from day one, you have a mental model of like, I think if I built XYZ, kids might love it. And at every point in the process, there is the like thing you're least sure of or the most risky assumption in that whole mental model. And it's this continual process of like, well, how can I prove or disprove that to myself? And I think that, I mean, for me, that process never ends. Like our main product is 6 years into this and we're still at that stage. Like, gosh, there's X number of people who don't use our product yet. Why do we think that is? What could we do to address that?
I think something that's challenging with kids too is that, at least in my experience, I find it more difficult with kids to test prototypes that aren't final. Because kids get distracted. It's hard, depending on their age, it's hard for them to conceptualize what this thing is that they're supposed to be imagining works like I'm telling them it should work. And so, I feel like if you're lucky enough to, be building something onto another, product that already allows you to collect feedback from kids via observation or just passive data collection, like that's beautiful. If not, sometimes I do feel like when you're in the kid space, you might just have to go and build the thing more so than perhaps in other spaces, just because it's so much more valuable to put a thing in front of a kid that they can actually use in the way that you're intending.
Yeah. Do any of you have any examples of prototyping tools or methods that you've used to validate ideas with kids and with parents? And what are those tools, if any?
Yeah, I do think it's very different for kids and parents. And one of the challenging parts about doing products for kids is that you have two customers. Like you never, I mean, if the kids are 10 and under, you never get to not include the parents in that process. And they often disagree about what they want, or even what the kids want. Like parents have a mental model of my kid will like X, and then you put that in front of the kid and it's like, no, they don't. So it's challenging. And when I think about grownups, like there's a lot of testing we can do just through conversations, like we call it verbal prototyping, where we describe something or examine it's sort of a borderline between user research and describing possible solutions and getting them to speculate about, well, when would you use that? And what might hold you back from using that? But yeah, with kids, we run into a lot, unless the prototype is really good. Like even when we do simple web mockups, like on a tablet and let people, like it's a web page because that's faster for our team to develop. The response time of web pages is slower. And so kids will tap the button over and over and over and just get really impatient quickly, or double tap and then the screen zooms. Like they will break things a lot more easily and get frustrated by it not working perfectly in a way that you can tell a grown up, this is a prototype, it's just a wireframe. There's no color on here yet because it's a wireframe, and they can follow along with you. Kids have a harder time sort of going along with it.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Megan, sorry.
Oh, I was going to kind of echo that and say that I think that, depending on where you're at in your product development cycle, it's harder to usability test with kids with prototypes that aren't final, like we've been discussing. But I think it's really helpful to sort of keep in mind the core principles about what you know about kids and what they want and what they find magical and awesome and amazing. And if you can apply what you know or what you learn through sort of talking with them and spending time with them to the product that you're building, and then find the overlap, as Keith was saying, between what feels like just unbelievably compelling and awesome to a kid and what feels successful to a parent. Sometimes it's not about like getting into actual usability. It's more about like, are these principles that we think we understand about kids and parents aligned?
So there's stuff that we've used in the past, and it's probably not for everybody, but when we first got into our first prototype pilot that we wanted to get feedback from the families was that we realized that when we went to people's houses, having the kid having access to a computer sometimes was really difficult, right? Depending on the families, right? Not all families could have a dedicated computer for their kids, right? And this was like issue that we came over and over. So what we did was we actually got Chromebook for all the pilot families so that kid could use. So only when they opened the Chromebook, only thing it had was our prototype, so they could actually access it and provide feedback. This was really valuable. So this was like a fastest way to get this feedback. The interesting part was that we weren't really testing the Chromebook itself. It was just a device to get faster feedback. But it's kind of interesting how parents were so overjoyed because they never seen a Chromebook for a lot of the family we work with. So that was like a surprising joy. So at some point we're like, should we pivot to like hardware? We're like, no, that's too hard. But but that was, yeah, so we wanted to have like a, how would you say, very like foolproof way of like getting kids to provide easy feedback. And that was really super useful. But we couldn't scale that, obviously, because we can't buy Chromebooks for everybody, right? But it was really, really useful during the early days. So that's one of the tactics we used.
It helps to have kids at home, because I find that, like I understand my kids well enough that I can see in a way when I test on other kids, you have to overcome the kind of shyness of a kid with a grown-up they don't know, and stuff like that.
Very true. Very true. Great. So I'm going to ask one more group question, and then Caitlin's going to pick up some of your questions from the chat. So just a reminder, if you have specific questions, just put them there, and Caitlin will address the group. So my last question is, let's just assume that you've got a product to offer, it's built. What are some of the most effective marketing approaches that you've seen or used for acquiring users today? And I don't know, is this different pre and during COVID?
I mean, I could start. I mean, one of the tactics that we've used when we were starting with like 3-people team, and with like limited budget, and trying to find that, let's say, early members of family who's willing to like invest on time, like trying out our product and, and providing feedback. It's really challenging, right? Because families are obviously very busy. So one of the things that we did was, just because we were getting desperate, was going to a lot of different Facebook groups, like parent groups or school groups or community groups, and actually being involved with the community and actually being honest, right? I'm not trying to fake it, being honest. Hey, we really want to get your feedback. We have this amazing games that your kids will like, and they'll learn something. And the feedback was positive. So I think I must have joined at least like 30, 40 different parent Facebook groups all over the country. And that was a really, really good investment, very guerrilla tactics, right? Another recommendation I had and stuff that I learned grade schools was, and I think more EdTech companies should be doing this, is offer your product that's bilingual, right? So for example, product offer that Spanish UI, for example, or Chinese or Arabic, right? There's like huge population out there who want this product in their language. And I don't think enough EdTech products are doing this. I think that's a really huge, big market opportunity that I think people should take advantage of, especially now. So I think those are two big things I could think about.
One trick that I've always had for usability testing, it works for parents too, is every time we do a user like interview call or usability test, I end the call by asking if they can think of 2 other people who might be open to doing the same call. And you very quickly get a few hops away from your like immediate circle of like friends and family. And most people, they have fun doing the calls, and they can usually think of 2 people.
Yeah, I don't know that I have too much to add on the marketing side. I know that we do a lot. We get a lot of our customers through social, Facebook, and I think there's a bit like there's like particular success that we found in easily allowing parents to share particular topics that their kids are passionate about, and they kind of, to Keith's point, they know 3 other kids who also are super into I don't know, Norwegian sharks. That doesn't make any sense, but the niche topics that we provide on Outschool, and allowing parents to share those specific topics rather than Outschool as a whole has been helpful for us.
Fantastic. So with G, it's maybe adding a unique feature or something like another language. With Keith, it's kind of the referrals. Yeah, I guess as we all know, there's no silver bullet in sort of user acquisition, but I imagine you know it when you've got something people want. But yeah, if anybody else in this group here has thoughts around different marketing ideas for acquiring users for a new product, a new EdTech product, by all means, raise your hand or something. But at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Caitlin to ask a few questions from you. So Caitlin?
Hi, thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts, panelists, and JP for moderating. There aren't actually that many questions, so you apparently did a great job. I'm going to start with the most recent one from Scott, which is a great one that I was also wondering. Are you offering a stipend to the parents who are formally participating in user testing? And if so, can you share how much you would compensate them for whatever time you're giving them? Because I assume there's different lengths based on what you're doing, and it might be qualitative versus quantitative. That's the first question.
Yeah, so for example, we never offer cash, for example. We always offer gift certificates for a lot of reasons. But usually they range from like, I mean, Bay Area is a little expensive, but still they range from like $75 to $100, depending on what it is, right? So for like a 30-minute interview, we would offer a $75 Amazon gift certificate if it's like our user testing, which is kind of rare because kids lose steam for that long, but we would offer like about $100, but yeah, so that's about the kind of range that we offer. Yeah.
I can jump in and say we do offer incentives. Typically for parents and kids, it is an Outschool credit. And we offer somewhere in the range of $1 to $2 per minute is kind of how we go about it. For teachers, we usually offer an Outschool credit or an Amazon gift card, their choice. Not all of them have kids on our platform. And then we also have a nonprofit arm, outschool.org. And for participants who I recruit through outschool.org, I usually offer, again, either the credit or the Amazon gift code.
Keith, anything to add?
Nothing that different. I think I should say it's usually not a sticking point. Like it's usually, people are usually excited to test, and we've done it both ways. Yeah,
we also at Creativity do some product testing, and we do compensate people a little less than G, but with Amazon gift cards, that seems to get kids really excited to try things. Another question, which I really love, is what is keeping you up at night since COVID started? And if I could rephrase this, that's coming in from Jessica. I'm sure that everything has changed with your products and that there are new features or new solutions that you want to offer. What are the things that are really sticking out to you that you would love to jump on because of all the new challenges with COVID?
Well, I mean, I could start. I think it's because something that I've been working on for the last couple of months is communication, right? So that's what we've been really focusing on at Kiddom. If you look at what a lot of schools are using now, they're using everything from Zoom to like what Google Meet, WebEx, and etc. But if you look at those products, they were designed for adults, right? They weren't really designed for kids, especially kids in elementary. So we had to rethink about how you do, let's say, video call, like chat and asynchronous and synchronous communication, and how does that get integrated with learning, right? And also like security and privacy, right? So we had to rethink everything in very short time, right? So that keeps me awake like every night, just because like, well, first of all, I want kids to be safe, we never want that Zoom bombing or anything, right? But I also want kids to like, cause I feel like a lot of the kids nowadays are so frustrated. They're stuck at home and they don't get to meet their friends at school, and there's very lack of like human interaction, right? So what can we provide that has like that classroom-like experience, but that's super easy to use, that's for teachers to minister, but also freedom for kids to really engage and learn something and communicate, right? but not to copy what other, like let's say, web conferencing systems are doing, but we think about how it works with kids. And so those are the stuff that I think about all the time, and we're still very early. And we're like, okay, what can we iterate? How can we get faster feedback, right? How can we tap with like different age groups? Yeah, it's very exciting, but also I know it's a very important thing that we need to accomplish, right? Because if we don't do this, and a lot of kids will suffer, right? So anyways, those are the things that I think about every night.
How do we create something that will be wildly popular? I think that is the hardest problem always. Most things will never become that popular, even if it's great and lots of love and hard work was put into it. Most things just won't ever get used by lots of kids or parents for that matter. And what's the difference between those products that really take off and those that don't?
And with the roots of this group having a lot of ties to the toy industry, we can relate to that statement very directly. It's very difficult to create a hit product, but it is amazing in this world. We say how quickly you can move, but I imagine that you're never able to move fast enough.
Yeah, and I don't know if moving faster increases your odds materially. I mean, maybe you get to try more things, but I think most of the time, like the common pattern in this industry is people sink tons and tons of time into making something that just doesn't take off. And it's like, so if anything, it's not that we're not moving fast enough. It's just like, how do we spend time on the right things? That's the magic of it all. Maybe the art of it all is the better way.
I think you're also uniquely challenged in that every child's situation is really different right now because we've lost all sort of standardization as a country. So I've talked to kids in New York and parents who have kids in New York and parents who are here in the Bay Area, parents who are in Minneapolis, and every single one of them has a different thing happening at their local level, and it might be different than their neighbors down the street. So the products that you're building you're not able to like blanket the whole US with them because some parents have great solutions and some just have nothing. So I think that's also a really unique challenge.
Yeah, well, and I wonder how much of that is COVID as opposed to just the early day, like we're in the first inning of the kids' internet where we don't yet have device ubiquity or OS version ubiquity or access, kids access or screen time rules. Like there's so much kind of fragmentation of the space. Whereas like, if you were to put a stuffed animal out, like, okay, cool. Every kid in America, even in COVID times, could use the stuffed animal with pretty much the same constraints. But as soon as you want it to be an app, it's like, oh, well, what's device penetration and what's the platform? And oh, does the parent's device need to connect to it? Do they have a device? Blah, blah, blah. So we're in this, this is what's so interesting to me about the space is that it does feel like we're so early that, unfortunately we have to contend with a lot of the challenges of fragmentation and not really having a standardized platform. It makes distribution hard, it makes product development hard, but it also is just this reminder of there being so much white space. There's so much greenfield opportunity.
Yeah.
A couple things come to mind for me in terms of what keeps me up at night during COVID related to Outschool. One is just in general, like how do we maintain quality while we scale? Because we are scaling so rapidly, and which are the most important, parts of the company to pay attention to in terms of quality, and what do we invest in there? I think somewhat related to that is trust and safety at Outschool. So, kids are at home now. Outschool teachers are often one of the only adults outside the family who actually kind of have direct contact with kids inside their homes, especially as some of the social support that schools provide is, no longer there. And so we have built up a trust and safety team pretty rapidly and just had to be very nimble and develop processes and procedures very quickly around how we deal with those issues. And I think we're doing well, but it's a big challenge. And then I think the third one is just with so many kids at home and isolated right now, socially isolated from their peers. I think Outschool provides great socialization within the class time that they have with their peers and the teacher. But I think there's more that we could do to be connecting kids socially across the platform, not just within an individual class that kids are taking. And so that's one that's close to my heart, that feels like there's this urgent need right now, and we're so well poised to meet that need in a variety of ways. And it's just figuring out the best way to go about that.
Great. Another question from Kim here. What is the process for having educational experts weigh in to guide in the creation of content? And I'll also add one from Edward, which is somewhat related. Do you distribute content from other people? So more about how you develop the content in general with the use of educators, and are using outside parties or content?
Yeah, so for example, at Kiddom, we partner with a lot of like education content providers. One of the biggest being the OUR, Open Up Resources, and we have a very close relationship with them, and with other like from ELs, etc. Right? So we don't, for example, at Kiddom, we don't actually make the content, but we actually partner with the content partners. But then we allow teachers to actually, use that content, or even like mix and match, right? And provide that personalized like learning type of experience for students. Yeah, so having a content partner is extremely important for us. And we do have in-house education expert who guide us with, with the whole process, and also like tracking the success and performance, and if it meets the rubric and all that stuff.
I can jump in and say, so Outschool is a marketplace. And so anyone who wants to teach can apply to be a teacher on Outschool, and teachers create their own curriculum, their own content. So every teacher who wants to list a class on Outschool has to get that class approved before it's published to families. And one of the major challenges that we faced in the past 6 months is also scaling our team that evaluates those classes both before and after they're listed on our platform. So for us, it's less about getting expert guidance in terms of content creation, and more about getting expert guidance related to the criteria we use to determine whether or not a class should be listed on our platform. And one of the things that we've done that we're continuing to do now is to build groups of basically small kind of advisory boards with subject matter experts in particular topics that tend to be a little bit tricky for our class approval team. So we have kind of a DEI advisory group. We have one that's related to sort of sex and gender topics for classes taught on the platform, and we're building out other councils as well.
We're unusual in that we make all of our own content. So, and we work with lots of educators. The educators are excited to help, generally speaking. So they're a pretty easy group to reach out to and get support from. We do some contrarian things, or have some contrarian views about making content. So we end up doing most of it in-house.
It's a great question for each of the companies that are here. I mean, Keith, have you thought about the marketplace solution or licensing content? And Megan, likewise, have you thought about doing some of your own 1P, if I call it that, content?
We've looked out there. I mean, I think if I wanted to make a like news website for grown-ups, there's so much news out there, and like you can create a great experience just by aggregating and filtering and bubbling the good stuff to the top. If you want to make explanations for children, there's so few great explanations for kids out there that like you basically have to create your own. So I think this is part of the early explosion of content for children. I think if you want to make stuff that feels more like school, like more like traditional lessons and classes, that's where there is the most stuff that's already been created. If you want to create a new kind of experience, then the aggregating and licensing is harder.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the founders of Outschool decided very early on that they did not want to sell content. They didn't want to create their own content, and we're not a content provider. we connect people. So that's sort of one of our core principles. Certainly, I think there's been discussion, and we continue to think about the possibilities of partnering with content providers to give our teachers access, ready access to content and tools that could help them more effectively teach on our platform. But I don't think that that's the direction that we're headed.
We ran an experiment once with Outschool where we asked some teachers who use mystery science, like, hey, you could offer it on Outschool. So that was an example of us trying something.
Ah, love to know how that went.
This was years ago.
I think that's a good place for me to sort of turn it back over to you, JP. I don't know if everybody wants to hang on and if anyone wants to come off mute and share anything that they've been thinking about, any of the other participants while they've been listening to the panel. We try to keep this really collaborative too. So thanks for sharing all of your questions, but if you had any comments or insights that you wanted to surface, I'd love to open this up.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion, and I'm happy to keep it punctual here at the 1 hour mark. Really dynamic conversation. I love people who have added who they're with in the chat. Please do so. I see we've got Josh from Light Up and Dimitri from My Buddy. Please add where you're coming from, and as Caitlin said, if you have any thoughts to add here, raise your hand or just chime in, particularly on that user acquisition one, because I'm still looking for the magic bullet on how to acquire users.
There's no magic bullet. Start a YouTube channel. That's the magic bullet. That's probably the most repeatable user acquisition channel for kids right now.
At DIY, we actually we didn't even incentivize her to do it, but we had a kid on our platform who started her own YouTube channel dedicated to getting kids to join DIY, which was a pretty amazing thing to discover, and it worked. It was a successful acquisition channel for us.
The hard part about kids is kids don't click ads. Most of them don't have email addresses. They don't sign up for things. So you pretty much are growing. We're focused on 5 to 10 or 4 to 10. And you're going through grown-ups parents for the most part at that age.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, especially with like a lot of the EdTech companies, one way to penetrate the family market sometimes you start with the schools first, right? Because there's a trust. Because your kids, you use your product all the time. There's a trust, and they're used to it. Your friends are using it. So naturally, if you want to use it at home, then you could have a business opportunity there. That's one way. But getting penetrated into school, yeah, that's a different story. That's really hard, right? It takes a long time, and we need relationships and a bunch of stuff. So that's one channel. If you already have a relationship with school, yeah, try at it. Maybe that's a good way to get to families and stuff. And versus other way around. If you start with families and trying to penetrate school, oof, man, that's it's going to be hard. I'm not going to lie. So that's something that you should be aware of when you start new EdTech products. Cause there's very different things depending on who your audience is, right? So.
It's funny. So I have a contrarian view. I feel like teachers in schools are easy to reach. There you have full-time professionals dedicated to figure out how to teach every single day. So you have this audience, and they're really well networked. So they love sharing resources with each other. But parents, as a parent, I don't spend that much time looking for things for my kids. It's get home from work, dinner, weekends, you're kind of squeezing it in. So yeah,
but you would trust recommendations from teachers, right? So if they recommend something for your child, you'll jump at it. But it's been interesting. I love teachers, and I think they're really good. They really think about when they recommend stuff, right? They don't just recommend anything. So your product has been pretty amazing to get recommended. But if you did, that's pretty golden. Yeah.
Parent-teacher communication is its own problem.
Oh yeah. Very saturated.
Hi, JP, could I jump in?
Go for it.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Josh. I appreciate all the insight so far. I typed something up, but I thought just to explain, I'm with Mystery and with some of the other companies that the three of you have been at, especially the ones that have done so well, looking at the penetration into the schools, I guess I'm on the other side of it. I was a former teacher, so I have some of that experience, but it seems very incredible, the reach that you have. And I'm kind of wondering, it's a hard question, I bet, but like, I imagine you were in some ways in where I am at now. And I'm curious, looking back, is there any advice or insight you can offer to someone or yourself at that time? Like, what gets you in that direction? Because, let's say you go like, certainly for us, and I'm sure your product as well, sort of early enthusiasm and sort of maybe with a local teacher or two, but then to scale up from that, do you have any advice on what worked well for your companies?
Schools is kind of its own thing. You're saying how to reach kids in schools? Was that specifically the question? What worked well for reaching kids in schools? Uh-oh, it looks like he froze, or he's thinking really hard.
That's how I heard it.
Okay.
Likewise.
Well, he might not hear the answer.
So, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh yeah. You're back. We found that teachers.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
We found that teachers were very eager to share resources with other teachers. Like there's a lot of sharing between teachers that happens.
So you found that organic, I guess, like a word of mouth or sharing early on?
Great. So I think I'll add one more question, and maybe if there's another one from the group, but my question generally is like, what are your predictions? This is a question for everyone here, but our panelists for sure, feel free to take the lead. What are your predictions, if any, for virtual learning post-COVID? And will learning ever be the same as we remember it?
Most of learning will go back to classrooms and will be the way that it was before. That's my prediction.
All right, good. G?
Yeah, I would like to think this whole COVID thing would be over soon, but I don't know when. I can't really give it the time. So until then, I think we're stuck either complete hybrid, complete remote or hybrid, right? So I think we have a long way to catch up. But I think one of the predictions that I have is that I think in this country that with just kids having a lot of the kids not having access to great internet access and devices and computers, I think that might actually further accelerate digital divide. I think we need to really address that really soon, right? The longer we wait, the gap's going to get bigger, So that's one of my predictions and how to prevent it.
Good point.
Hi, this is Kim. I just wanted to weigh in on my prediction. I think I think it's going to be a hybrid because since COVID started, there has been some wildly fantastic new innovative ideas in the EdTech sector. And I think that's going to really attract parents on how they educate or how they send their kids to school. I think there's going to be so many different options. And so I think it's going to be a hybrid between everything that's going to be offered now versus going back to a brick and mortar type of school. So I think, depending on where you are, generation wise or, within geographic wise, I think it's going to be, it's going to bridge the gap between the two. That's my prediction.
I think I'm with Kim, and a concern I'll raise alongside that is that it really does, and actually G spoke to this as well, it really does create more of a gap between people who can afford to have more personalized learning and those private teacher pods and everything that's happening, and other people who might not be able to access that, who are in a classroom or maybe not getting those resources. So I think there's good things that are coming out of this where some kids who might normally not be able to learn well in a classroom setting are finally getting something that they can respond to. But there's going to have to be a way for us to merge the good and the bad from what we're learning through this, and hopefully make sure we don't leave any kids behind. Is my thought to add.
Yeah, I agree that the future of education probably looks pretty different depending on your socioeconomic status. But my hope is that what's happening right now is opening parents' eyes to the benefits of virtual learning. Not that they'll necessarily replace in-person learning, because there's still plenty of ways that in-person learning, works better. But that for families who didn't have access to, a teacher who teaches a niche subject in the way that their particular learner learns, will now understand that that's possible, and that it will expand options for kids. So I agree that I think it will be more of a hybrid model, but that it will depend on how much money you have in terms of access.
So I'd love to elaborate on a contrarian view. So I think pre-COVID, we were already seeing this big shift towards digital resources in classrooms and the early days of a shift towards digital resources for kids at home. So COVID accelerated what was already happening. It led to a lot more development of digital resources in both, and it increased the sort of shift over to those. So in many ways, it sort of accelerated the future that was coming either way. One interesting thing that it's always so important, I think, to point out is that progress and advancement leads to short-term inequity. And so I actually think that when we start to observe short-term inequity in access, it's a sign of a good thing happening. Every technological advancement that's ever happened, from automobiles were first purchased by a small group of people who could afford them, and then they scaled up, and now almost anyone can afford a car. Personal computers were first this incredibly expensive luxury for a small group. They scaled up, and now almost everyone can afford a computer. Cell phones, the internet, sort of, et cetera, et cetera. So when we see development of new resources that are starting to be used by an initial group and not others, one thing I always remind my team is, rather than see this as a bad sign and something to be resisted, instead, let's see this as the early days of scale and ubiquity. And as long as we focus on scale and making something ubiquitous, that necessarily addresses the long tail of access problems. It addresses the economies of scale you get. You get to amortize your costs across greater scale. It brings costs down, which is one of the biggest obstacles for access, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's maybe unusual to say it, but I think that the observations of inequity and access to new tools is actually a sign of innovation and good things happening. And we should just lean into it and scale them up.
Great call. I don't think that's a contrarian view.
It kind of feels like no one's really figured it out completely yet. Like, we're in such a period of disruption, trying to think about what's going to happen next year, I think, is really hard. Never mind the longer term view.
I'm hopeful and optimistic that this past 6 months will help parents in the United States really critically evaluate how their kids are learning and how they spend money outside of the school that their kids are at. So I feel like in Asian countries, parents spend significantly more on out of school learning than United States families. And I feel like that means that Outschool and companies like it are going to be even more successful in the future, because parents will be investing more because they got a really behind the scenes look at what online learning and in-school learning was and is in comparison with what they thought it was before, and just how much teachers were doing beforehand, or horrified by how much they think that they're not doing, which is a horrible pessimistic way to think of it. A
funny line I heard from someone else in the industry that sums this up is, I know more about the status of my UPS package or my Amazon package than I do about what my kid's doing in school today.
Yeah.
So there's such a, we as parents, we were so in the dark about what was happening. And we learned a lot more really quickly about what do our kids do all day in school?
Yeah.
Nothing. What did you do today? Nothing.
Well, you have to phrase the question right,
Yeah, I mean, another interesting trend that I've been observing, and I think it's getting more frequent, is now that some of the parents are becoming, if you think about it, informal teachers, right? You're having a lot of learning at home, and the kids are not at Zoom all the time, but maybe just a few hours a day. So meanwhile, a lot of the parents are feeling it as like that, like rookie teacher, but no one really trained them. So I see like huge opportunity for us to really, how do we actually get parents to be more informed and know stuff about even stuff like Common Core? What is it? How to do Common Core math, or what is how you even do that kind of stuff, right? So I think I think there's a need to shift focus also on training parents and how to actually help parents to educate their kids better at home without being a full-time teacher. And I think that's going to be more common as we stay at SIP for a really long time. Hopefully that will be over, but yeah, I know so many parents, friends, and family that's filling that role, and they're not equipped to do it, and no one's really trained them. So I think maybe our community could do something about it. But I see that's one of the trends that I see.
It's funny. I see parents doing less of it over time. Like the general trend, if you rewind, 100 years ago, a lot of reading, writing, arithmetic was like parents at home teaching the basics to their kid. And so much of advancement is the increase in specialization. And so now that we've got dedicated professionals who do it, so I expect the increase in specialization to continue. But I would expect more so that we might get like subject matter specialists even at the elementary grades, right? Where we have that for middle school and high school, but in elementary, it's like you've got a generalist homeroom teacher. So I generally see an increase towards specialization as opposed to let's train other people how to sort of do a better job with it. Like parents, I think most parents will increasingly lean on experts. Like Outschool is a great example of like, now you can lean on Outschool to teach your kids something where previously you'd kind of muddle through it yourselves. I think we'll see the increase in use of experts.
Yeah, I think it also comes with like costs, right? I agree. I think like services like Outschool and etc. It provides great service. It's just that short term, like can a lot of the families afford it, right? So I know like a lot of families wish they could have like home pods, but it's out of their price range, So I'm hoping that what you said, at some point the price will drop down because of the scale, but until then, you're kind of stuck, right?
Well, we've got so much great history. That's the one thing we know is you scale it up and prices will come down. That's almost a truism.
I'm going to step in and just suggest that it might be a good time for us to wrap. I know a lot of people posted who they are in the Zoom. It's hard to connect with people and continue afterwards, but hopefully you've been following who everybody else is who's been on the group chat in addition to the panelists. Continue to follow this conversation and connect with each other on LinkedIn and in the group, actually in the meetup group. It's an active channel, so please feel free to post questions or other things there. Liana always helps to make this video available so that you can review it again afterwards. So feel free to reach out to really any of us, myself, Caitlin, or JP or Liana, if you have questions or you want to find somebody. We're really happy that you all joined, and this was really an exciting and very challenging and fun conversation. So thanks for participating. Thank you to our panelists. It was great to hear all about your companies. JP, anything to add before we break?
No, that's perfect. Thanks again to everyone for joining and especially to our panelists.